Hello, Mark Fletcher back with you again, and this is a video I just had to make because this really happened. It wasn't staged. Of course, I wasn't recording when the actual event occurred, so what I've recorded here is staged, naturally. And I did this yesterday, and I decided to use real weather. And it just so happens that there was a major storm coming through the Raleigh-Durham area at the time that I made the recording, so it really added some complexity to the situation. And I have to admit this is pretty embarrassing, but I decided just to leave it in there so you could see exactly how this happened. I think you'll conclude that I'm a much better software engineer than I am a pilot. So let me set the scene up for you. We've had some kind of bad weather around here, and since this is the middle of hurricane season, and I don't live in the city, so Duke Energy, that provides our power, decided since we're such a small neighborhood, they would just send somebody out to Home Depot and buy a large extension cord and plug our neighborhood into it. So when a storm starts brewing, it scares the deer, and they trot across the extension cord sometimes and knock it loose, because that's what deer do. Okay, I know I'm starting to sound a little bit like Rosanna Dana, but needless to say, we lose our power quite often. So I'm in the device configuration in X-Plane, and I'm making some changes to the Bravo, and suddenly the power goes out. So we wait out the couple of hours until they realize where the extension cord was, and they plug it back in, and we're back and running. Well, I get back into X-Plane, and I check things out in the Bravo, the changes that I was making. Everything looked fine, so I don't think too much more about it. Now, what I didn't know was the autopilot auto throttle speed hold on command got simultaneously assigned to the same button as my autopilot. And the autopilot button still worked, but it also turned on this auto throttle. Now, you're probably thinking, like I would, that the Cessna 172 certainly doesn't have an auto throttle, so this really should have no effect. But you would be wrong. Here's how I found out. November 7 Whiskey Alpha, ready for departure, runway 05 right.
November 7 Whiskey Alpha, winds are 029er at 13 knots, gusts to 27 knots, altimeter is 29er cleared for takeoff, runway 05 right, squawk 3631.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 05 right, squawk 3631, 7 Whiskey Alpha.
Roger.
Now right here's where the trouble begins. I just turned on the autopilot, which also turned on this auto throttle. And since this auto throttle is an on command rather than a toggle, hitting the autopilot button again won't turn it off. And it will be at least 10 to 15 minutes later that I realize this, because I'm in climb out and just maintain full throttle.
November 7 Whiskey Alpha, turn left heading 295, then direct Juliet Alpha Yankee Romeo.
Left 2 heading 295, direct to the JR transition, 7 Whiskey Alpha.
November 7 Whiskey Alpha contact Raleigh departure on 132.35. Enjoy your afternoon.
Departure on 132.35, 7 Whiskey Alpha. Good day. Raleigh departure, November 227 Whiskey Alpha is at 2,200, climbing to 8,000.
November 7 Whiskey Alpha, good afternoon. Radar contact.
So it's right here that I realize I have absolutely no throttle control and that the throttle is stuck full open. Luckily, Miles Field's only about 7 miles away. I do a direct to Miles Field, so now that buys me a few seconds so that I can clear my head and think about what to do next. So I get my emergency checklist out, and I'm just about to kill the engine when somehow it occurs to me that I can use the mixture as kind of a throttle. And I'm giving myself big points here because I normally don't think anywhere near this fast. But controlling engine RPM with mixture is really, really touchy. Just the tiniest movement. So I am catching on to this, but it makes me pretty nervous that I'm going to shut off the engine. I'm going to bring up the sectional chart and see if I can find Miles Field, which is unfortunately a field I've never been to. So there it is, just off to the right ahead of me. And I'm also checking for the highest obstruction in this sector, and it looks like 2,200. And when I listened to the Outage report earlier, it said that 3,000 feet was the beginning of the cloud cover. So I'm hoping that I can drop below 3,000 or right at it and get into a clearing. So I'm going to set my altitude bug at 3,000 and use the autopilot to drive me down, because I sure don't want to do this by hand in this suit. And I also want to get my speed down into flap range so I can drop my flaps, because I think it's a little bit easier to use this mixture control if I have a little bit of drag on the airplane. I'm putting the emergency code 7700 in the transponder, only the transponder's turned off and I didn't realize that, so okay. Now, following the checklist, I'm setting the emergency radio frequency to 121.5 by pressing and holding the transfer button until the numbers come up. Mayday, Mayday, November 227 Whiskey Alpha. I have a stuck throttle. I'm about 5 miles east of Miles Field at 5,000 feet. And that's November Charlie 34. And I'm attempting a landing at Miles Field. I want to check out Miles Field one more time here, and I see this an east-west runway, and right now I'm heading west and I've got a pretty serious headwind, so I definitely want to use this runway 27, and it's a grass field too, so it's going to be hard to find. And it looks like pattern altitude's about 1,600 feet. Well, I'm coming up on 3,000 feet and it still doesn't look like I'm getting out of this stuff, so I'm going to drop it on down to at least 2,500. Sure don't like getting this low. Well, that's 2,500 and it's still soup. Boy, I hate to do this, but I'm dropping down to 1,600. Okay, 1,600 didn't work, so now I'm scud running. Well, I know the field is out in front of me here somewhere. I'm going to use this moving map and see if I can figure out where I am. At least I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable using this mixture as a throttle, so I am able to relax a little bit. And I'm just going to make circles around this field on the map until I can see it. Okay, that looks like it. Well, no, I guess that's just a bald spot. Okay, according to the map, it's off to my left. Okay, that's it right there, just off to the left. Okay, I'm going to do a low pass here and just check this out, and then I'm going to circle back around and see if I can do a pattern landing. Okay, I'm downwind to the runway now, but I still can't really see anything, so I'm just kind of guessing at where to make the base turn. Okay, that looks sort of reasonable, I guess. When I get over the tree line, I'm just going to pull back on the mixture, which is something I've been scared to death to do. And this wind is really making this challenging. Okay, piece of cake. Well, not really. So I'm sure you've noticed a heap of things I did wrong, and I'm sure I will too after I watch this. But this was for real, and I didn't cut out anything I didn't want you to see. And I'm certainly not presenting this as a tutorial on how to do this. Okay, well, thank you for watching, and I hope that you found this at least entertaining.